Great point. That's like Ron Paul. He'll be on CNN, Fox, and they say, you want to get rid of the income tax. How will we have a government? And he says, this capital was built behind me, this whole system, and we didn't have this income tax. Let's look more at the 999 than briefly at what's happening in Europe, and then we'll let you go, Peter. Looking at 999, there's that payroll tax that anybody who actually has a real business in the real world knows is there. So it's 9999. But what about the danger of once, let's say Herman Cain was successful, once they got into the position of having the camel's nose under the tent flap, what happens then once they start trying to raise the different taxes? A, and B, what about the prospect of having the federal government now involved in sales taxes and VAT? We think we have a nightmare now with the IRS. What about this power grab with federal tentacles into everything?
Yeah, I mean, that's another risk that you give the government another revenue stream to exploit. But look, I think we risk higher taxes regardless, whether they get us through a sales tax or an income tax. And of course, the sales tax is somewhat self-correcting as to abuse, which is what the founding fathers said, because if they jack that tax up too high, people won't buy. There'll be a black market that people will try to avoid it. So you can't put a sales tax too high or you're not going to have any sales to tax. But I have sympathy with the idea that, look, we want less government. We want to take away these revenue streams. I would love to replace the income tax with a sales tax. But yes, this layers it on top of it. I know Herman Cain's goal is to actually eventually get rid of the income tax and go to a total sales tax model. So that is the goal. But of course, you know what we say about the best laid plans, what often happens to them. But I don't think that's really the best criticism of his plan. I think the real criticism is the hidden nine. When you hear guys like Rick Romney arguing about, well, it's a federal sales tax on top of a state sales tax. I mean, so what? I mean, we got a federal income tax on top of a state income tax. So if we could get rid of the two income taxes and have two sales taxes instead, I think that's better. I mean, it doesn't bother me to pay a sales tax. I don't have to hire accountants. I don't have to keep records. I don't have to file forms. I just pay it. I don't even consider it. So I would much rather have the federal government taxing me on what I spend than on the income tax. Even if I ended up paying the same amount of tax, it'd just be a lot easier for me. And
sure. In fact, what's the number?
This whole compliance structure.
Well, that's what I was about to ask. Well, I forget the number. It's some gargantuan amount. How much do Americans spend every year complying and filing income taxes?
Oh, it's like at least $500 billion. And think about industries. Think about all the accountants. What a waste of time. I'm in the brokerage industry. I have people coming up with all kinds of accounts, pensions, IRAs, KIOs, estate planning. All of this is to avoid the income tax. Just get rid of it and there's nothing to avoid. And then we don't have to waste all these resources doing things that we don't really need. We can use these resources productively. We're in a gigantic economic hole now. We need everybody possible helping us dig our way out. We don't want a bunch of accountants and lawyers getting in the way.
Peter, I've been asking the questions here tonight, but I want to get your view on Ron Paul and where his campaign is going. A, and then B, looking at Europe, we saw the dollar get hammered today, but Europe is in a lot of trouble. They haven't been able to get their, quote, deal to create this new super Eurozone that's going to attempt to raise taxes to pay off all these debts. So where do you see Ron Paul's campaign going, A, and B, what do you see happening in Europe and the U.S. economy?
Well, I mean, obviously, I'm hopeful that Ron Paul's campaign will catch on. I mean, right now, he's still hovering around 10%. So that puts him kind of ahead of the second tier, but still behind the top tier candidates. So he really needs to kind of break out. And it seems like everybody has been getting their turn in the limelight. First, it was Michelle Bachmann, and then her star faded quickly. Now we got Herman Cain. So maybe Ron Paul is going to have his day. I don't know. Hopefully he will. I know that as the race progresses, eventually some people are going to drop out. And Ron Paul is going to have the staying power because he does have, very committed supporters. So his support is not that wide, but it's really, really deep. That gives him the staying power. Hopefully he can stay in it long enough to catch on. I think Romney really shot himself in the foot by admitting on the last debate that the only reason he didn't want to hire illegals was because he was running for president and it would look bad. So that's going to come back and bite him. I think Rick Perry, his star fizzled out pretty quickly too. So Herman Cain's got some problems. Can Herman Cain really stay at the top? And if not, who's going to replace him? I mean, maybe Newt Gingrich, I don't know, but Ron Paul, he's got a shot at it. So we got to stick in there. He's got to keep plugging away. Maybe if we can get some more media coverage. You never know. I think he can beat Obama, so we just got to get him the nomination. But I still would have to say it's still, a long shot, but it's not no shot. Anyway, getting to your question about the euro and the dollar. Look, I think the euro is going to rally. I think that, as bad as the problems are in Europe, they are worse here. I'm convinced of that. And so I think we've got bigger problems for the dollar, and we might get a big rally in the euro. We're at a key level right here, the way we closed out the week in the currency markets, the stock markets, global stock markets. If they move up on Monday, we can have a huge rally in stock markets, and we could have a huge decline in the dollar. That doesn't mean I think there's going to be a new bull market in stocks. I think that we're going to run into resistance up around, 12,400 or 500 in the Dow. And then I think there's going to be another problem that's going to come up, and it's going to cause another sell-off. I think we move sideways, but I think we got a lot of people that were too negative, got short in that last sell-off last month, and I think that we're going to get a rally. Now, if we sell off on Monday big, then because we're right at the resistance right now, we're right where we should sell off. But looking at the action in the market this week, we haven't had the sellers up at this high end. There's been buying coming in, and I think we're going through the overhead resistance. So I think the markets look like they want to go up, and the dollar looks like it wants to go down. I think the wild card is going to be the bond market, because the bond market could also get beat up a little bit here if the stock market goes up and the dollar goes down. That could set up potentially the next crisis, maybe late in the year, early next year, where if the dollar and the bond market are falling a lot, that could, be problematic. Right now, I think people look at a weak dollar as a good thing. I don't think it's good, but I think Wall Street thinks it's good. But eventually, they might think it's too much of a good thing. And instead of worrying about the euro, we might actually start worrying about the dollar.
Going back to Ron Paul, I agree with your analysis. We've seen the stars rise of people like Perry, people like Bachman, and then fade. Ron Paul has really got the issues. He's got the gravitas. He's in that 10, 15-point range. And if he can just stay in there, they had a big scientific study come out last week that he's being ignored more than any candidate. If they gave him fair coverage, he would be the front runner. And so he's got a real potential. If this was the Indianapolis 500, he's in third place right now. There's no doubt. And if we point out the real record of gun control and open borders and Obamacare of Mitt Romney and the Federal Reserve tax and spend, type activities of Herman Cain, Ron Paul is going to shoot up there as that leader, even if the dinosaur corporate media tries to block him. In closing, you have predicted much of what's happened in our economy. More and more the mainstream media admits it's more of a depression than a recession. Obama is falling like a rock. Pelosi won't even mention his name. The system is definitely out of bullets.
I'm kind of hoping that Cain will appoint Art Laffer as his economic advisor, and then we can resurrect those old CNBC debates with me and Art Laffer, where he got everything completely wrong, and say, hey, why is this guy your economic advisor? And that might discredit him a bit and help Ron.
Well, Peter Schiff, thank you so much for spending time with us tonight. I look forward to talking to you again in the future. And, of course, we've had your Euro-Pacific Capital website up. There's also schiffradio.com for folks to visit. I appreciate you joining us tonight.
Hey, thanks a lot, Alex. Have a great weekend.
Thank you for spending time with us. You have a great weekend as well. And you, the viewers of InfoWars Nightly News, I want you to have a great weekend. But the show isn't over. We're going to break. We're coming back. I'm going to debate a British think tank operative who doesn't like conspiracy theorists talking bad about the New World Order. That's coming up after this break. Stay with us. It's InfoWars Nightly News.